Hey everyone, welcome to the E2 Effective Elders podcast. Visit us at e2elders.org and please share this good word with others.
Hey everybody, welcome back to E2 Effective Elders, our monthly podcast. And what we're doing is we're trying to learn new skills and abilities to lead the local church all the more effectively. And today we're going to have a great conversation about AI. And we welcome Zach Coffin to help drive that conversation. Zach, welcome to our E2 podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Would you do that, please?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. It's been so good getting to connect with you guys and appreciate the work that you guys are doing. And so, yeah, my name's Zach Coffin. I've been doing ministry since I was 19 years old. So I've been a pastor since I was 19, started preaching when I was 16, have done that in various ways across the kingdom the last 20 years, from small church to multi-site mega church, leading kids in student ministry. Most recently was the director of Next Gen for a denomination, leading all of our churches across the U.S. and Canada. And now find myself in this really interesting bivocational role where I'm the vice president of a business called the Higher Ed Marketer, where we work with primarily Christian higher ed institutions, helping them with marketing and enrollment and all that stuff. But then doing a ton of work with AI in all those spaces. So it's been a really cool journey the last couple of years, how God has kind of, calling doesn't change, but assignment changes. And this assignment in this season has been to dive headlong into generative AI and helping the church, man. It's cool.
Yeah. And Mike, why don't you explain to our constituents how your path crossed with Zach? Would you do that, please?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, Zach, I don't know if we've explained this even to you, but you had done a master class at a church in Indianapolis, of Carmel, Indiana.
Yeah.
And my older brother, who's been a longtime pastor, was in that class. He's also a part of the E2 network as a part of one of our partner churches. And so he sent me your slide deck that you had shared, and he said, man, E2 needs to invite Zach to come do something. And so that's what prompted the original phone call to Zach long ago. So thanks, Stan, for making that recommendation.
That's awesome.
It's all about networking.
Yeah.
That's right. Connecting.
Well, yeah. And before Zach starts talking about AI, I'm going to just be a little confessional here. So last year we were talking about AI here in the office, and one of the guys on our E2 office team, David, he said, man, I used AI to write a poem. And I went, what? A poem for his wife. And I've attempted to write, roses are red, violets are blue kind of stuff for Leah. So he said, just pull up Chat GPT and I'll show you how to do it. So I did, and I typed in some things about my wife and whatnot. And I just hit the enter. And within seconds, 30 seconds, here I have this 8-stanza poem about Leah. And I printed it. I put some nice things on the color print, and I took it home. And during supper, I said, Leah, I wrote you a little poem today. She said, you did? And I said, yeah, just put that fork down and let me read it to you. Is that all right? And so I'm reading this poem, and she's just getting all teary-eyed, and it was incredible. And I said, well, okay, I'm a pastor. I got to confess, it was Chat GPT.
assisted, right?
Yeah, at least I could buy the flowers to go with the poem.
That's right. That's awesome.
Anyway,
That's awesome.
that was not very ethical. It was finally ethical when I confessed that it was not me who was the lyricist to write that poem. So anyway, Zach, something that we like to use here at E2 is an outline, a structure for a conversation that comes from Simon Sinek's ever famous theory of the golden circle. He's even written that bestseller book for leaders called Start With Why. So just those 3 very simple questions. We're going to start with why. And if you could tell us why AI should matter to a church leader, why? Then let's move to how. In a simple way, how can a church leader take maybe the first steps in using generative AI? And then what really must matter to a church leader who's going to utilize generative AI. So why, how, what? Take it away, buddy.
Yeah. So I think part of the why, just again, just to kind of help build some trust with people, kind of framework, because I think there's a lot of tension and a lot of misunderstandings with generative AI, and there can be a lot of fear. On the marketplace side of our role, in the hired marketer, we've taken over 1,200 marketing enrollment professionals through master classes, and so I started using generative AI over 2 years ago, trying to figure out how that stuff works, and then just saw this huge need within the church because this technology is going to be extremely disruptive. And so I think this is where I'm old enough and I'm young enough. I'm old enough to remember before the internet, and I remember not having. I remember when we got our first computer in our house. I remember sitting there and waiting for. I mean, you all remember this. Sitting there at your house, and then you would click connect to the internet, and you would hear the beep beep beep,
Yeah.
just begging God that you would get a good connection. Just like,
Right.
Lord, please let the internet connect. And so I remember those technologies coming out. I remember, I mean, even the iPhone coming out. I remember social media coming on board. So that's where I'm like old enough and young enough where I remember these things before, and I've been living with them now, as a digital native, as a millennial now, seeing these things and just seeing the disruption that this is bringing, and going, there's been times throughout history where I think the church has been slow to engage with different things, maybe tentative. And I think with generative AI, we just have to lift our eyes up and realize that generative AI isn't just a tool that's going to be used. It's actually going to become a teammate for a lot of us, and especially for our marketplace people. 2 years ago, the statistic was 92% of Fortune 500 companies were using generative AI. I would argue that statistic now is probably 100% of Fortune 500s are using generative AI. Now, of course, that can depend on your sector and your industry, blue collar, white collar, finance, all that. But I think we as church leaders, one of the things I would just encourage us and challenge us to think about is, if we're shepherding our flock, part of our responsibility as pastors is to recognize the emerging technologies, not stick our heads in the sand, but if we're going to shepherd our people well, we need to have some really decent knowledge about what this technology is doing. And what's different with generative AI is because it is becoming more and more cooked into everything. During the master class that I teach, I have this slide where it shows like a horse and a plow and then a tractor. And that's how I taught it for a while, was like, hey, it's like, this is like the next phase. And then the combine comes on, like, where now the way I teach that slide is I've got the horse and the tractor, the horse and the buggy and the tractor. And then I have an image of electricity, because really generative AI has become the infrastructure that everything is built on. And so we have to lift our eyes up and realize this stuff's not going anywhere. Our people, there's a pastoral care element of us as pastors needing to be able to talk to people as they're using this stuff, understand the technology. But then I do think there's actually some really incredible ministry applications that will help us as pastors and as church leaders reclaim our time for what matters most. I don't know that I've ever met a pastor or an elder or anyone that jumped into their role at their church and said, I just want to take on as much administrative skills as I absolutely can. Can I please write more job descriptions? Can I please review more budgets? Can I please spend all of my time on every on every administrative task that I can do? And Seth Godin has a really cool framework that he uses where he talks about generative AI being the tool that can eliminate chores so that you can make decisions. And I think from a church standpoint, that for me is where I get very excited about the application. So yes, there's theological things we have to be aware of. Yes, there's like with transhumanism, all these things, we have to be very aware of those things and teach a holistic gospel. But then we also have to recognize that the Lord has entrusted us a group of people to shepherd. As elders, the Lord's entrusted us to shepherding. And what if we were able to use some tools to reallocate as much time as possible back to the primary reasons we said yes to the assignment and the call that God asked us in the first place?
All right. So our why should this matter to us? You've just articulated many bulleted items. That here is this technological tool, a platform by which we can be all the more effective in shepherding the body of Christ. And so that's a very noble why. And as protectors, shepherds, as you said this word more than once, it's very important, disruptive. So as a shepherd, we need to be understanding this. We need to be culturally aware.
Absolutely.
And so there's a powerful why. All right, so now let's talk about the how. How can a leader in a church begin the journey to using AI? Just very simple, because Mike will be sharing with everybody how you are going to join us for a much longer conversation.
Yeah.
But in a nutshell, how can a shepherd, a leader, an elder take those first initial steps in this direction?
Yeah. So I think this may sound very elementary, but I think it's the reality of this is the only way that you learn how to ride a bike is by getting on the bike and trying to learn how to ride the bike. And so from a how standpoint, a really simple, I tell this to all of our classes at some point in the class, like the easiest thing you can do is to start learning how the tools work. And one of the phrases my wife uses all the time in her consultancy is like, we have to be people who own our own solution and recognize that we have to be the ones to own our learning, to own our understanding. And here's the thing. This is where I have such a deep heart for pastors and for church leaders is I can feel and hear people listen to this going like, you're telling me I have one more thing to do. Because I think as church leaders, we're always working from that tyranny of the urgent. There's always a pastoral care call that comes up or this, that, or other. And those aren't bad things. And we all said yes to those things. And we know that that's part of it, but we have to own our own learning and begin to understand that this isn't going anywhere. And a simple way to do that is download ChatGPT to your phone or get a login and start just trying it. So here's
love poems to your wife.
Start writing a love poem. So here's this is going to sound really ridiculous, but this is one of the easiest things you can do. I'll give you a couple use cases that I did. One, I went to download Chat on my phone, went to my pantry, took a picture of my pantry and asked Chat to give me 5 recipes based off of what it saw in my pantry.
Wow.
I was putting in irrigation. We've got raised beds in our backyard. I'm like, I need to put in irrigation in my backyard. So normally the process, and this is where, again, this education, when people think this is why I think it's going to be so important for people to come to the extended training time, because part of what has to happen is we have to understand that generative AI is not Google. Generative AI is not YouTube. Generative AI is not because depending on what generation people are from, their first instinct is like, oh, generative AI is just a souped up Google. And it's like, that is not, that's like saying like a calculator is the same thing as a computer hooked up to the internet. Like it's not even the same thing. And so like what I was saying about I had raised beds. I'm like, okay, instead of me going to Google, finding a YouTube video, finding just Google searching it, I said to Chat, hey Chat, acting as a garden expert, I need to put in raised beds in my backyard. They're 4 foot by 8 foot. Please do the research to let me know what is the best drip irrigation for my backyard. Here's my budget. Here, ask me any questions before you give me your answer. And Chat, what it'll do, it gave me questions to answer. I answered those questions. And within seconds, it said, here's how you do it. Here's where you can get your materials. Here's how you take all that stuff. And so normally a project like that would have taken me 2 to 3 hours to do all that research. I was done in 10 minutes and had the stuff ordered. And so those are just some simple things. Even like let's say that you're doing some And again, this is where I've just done this enough. I can hear people, well, chat lies and chat hallucinates and chat. And what a hallucination is when chat tries to please you with information that's not true. That would be that's what it's known as hallucination. And I go, this is where we have to also understand that when we're using generative AI, we're not forfeiting our subject matter expertise. We're staying in that seat of expert. And this is why we teach it. Like we're going to have human on the front end. We're going to use generative AI, and then we're going to have human editing on the back end. So like even with an email, let's say that you've got a challenging email. Like I have staff. Sometimes we have to have really hard conversations as a staff. Instead of me sitting there and staring at their email for 15 minutes, trying to figure out the best way to respond to that, and then writing my first draft and it sounding really harsh, and then me having to go, okay, let me fluff this up a little bit or move. Like, did I capture all this? I can take those emails into chat, drop them in, say, hey, chat, I need to craft a response for this. And instead of me wrestling with that, I can even hit the dictate button on chat and just start talking to it. Say, hey, chat, here's what I need to do. I need to respond to this email. Here's the things I want to make sure that I point out, X, Y, Z. I want to make sure that it sounds clear, consistent, but also warm, where I'm not overstating something. Ask me any questions before you respond to the email. Chat will ask me those questions, and then it'll give me an actual email draft, and it gives me something to react to and gets me off that white page. So those are 2 or 3 really simple things that people can do to just start wetting their whistle a little bit of going like, again, this isn't just a piece of technology that's a tool. I'm genuinely doing 10 to 15 hours of additional output of work every week because I've learned how to do some basic generative AI prompt design and things like that. So I'm really being able to maximize my time.
Yeah, very similar to if we have a new believer, we have to walk that new believer through an actual Bible. Here's an Old Testament, here's a New Testament, etc., to get them familiar with this eternal, life-changing book. Similarly, just as you said, what's a first step? How do we engage? Well, let's download the app for ChatGPT to the phone. Let's start experimenting. Very, very good. Now, last question. What? As you speak to a church leader who's just starting to get acquainted with artificial intelligence, what is important for that individual to keep in mind?
Yeah. So when it comes to the what, a couple things I would say is the first what, and again, people have heard me say this 3 or 4 times at this point during this conversation, is we have to own our own solution and realize that it's going to take that time for us to invest to learn. And so you taking the time to learn is going to be really, really important, because the first places that you're going to find where it's going to benefit you is efficiencies. You're going to be able to find efficiencies in your day-to-day activities across the work that you're doing to be able to accelerate and reclaim some of your time. Another what for us to be thinking about, and this is where we don't have time to get into all this today, is just there are so many relational theological things that we have to be thinking through when it comes to generative AI. So here's an interesting statistic. 93% of Gen Z would rather, in their jobs, talk to a chat bot than their supervisor. We can argue all day if that's good, bad, right, wrong. The reality is that's Gen Z's behavior. And so what that shows us is where people are starting to lean towards relationships. What does that mean for us in the gospel? We're an incarnate people. We believe that it's through our relationships with each other that provide the highway for the Holy Spirit to do his work. Is that it's this ironing, sharpening iron. It's us understanding what it means to be human, and how that the way that God set us up as physical beings isn't just an interesting talking point, but it actually matters to our faith and to our transformation and to the resurrection and those types of things. And so I just want to encourage pastors to start thinking of just a little bit deeper on these things, and not waiting a year or 2 or 5 years, because even with what I've seen over these last 2 years and how much change has come, there's just so much opportunity. And then even on the ethics side, Gary and I were talking about this a little bit. There are certain activities within our pastoral work that we're not going to be able to outsource to generative AI, and we shouldn't. And we shouldn't.
Correct.
There's certain things that we just shouldn't. And I'll give you one of my guardrails. This is one of my guardrails. During sermon prep, I can use ChatGPT to help me do, I can help me do research, help me process. But it is my responsibility to wrestle with the Lord what his word for his people is.
Right.
I'm not going to, for me personally, I'm not going to have ChatGPT. I'm not going to dump in my sermon, dump in some illustrations and say, hey, write this sermon for me. Because for me, I want to do the hard work of wrestling with the Spirit to discern the word of God for his people. And that's not something that I can outsource to a piece of technology. Now, if I'm stuck on an illustration and I just can't get something to kind of hit right, or I know some people like using acronyms and stuff like that. Great. Love that you use acronyms. Like I'm terrible. I have dyslexia, so I'm terrible at acronyms, but like if I need to use it to kind of help, like I can do those types of things, but I don't want to outsource the work of me sitting, on my knees before the Lord, wrestling with him, discerning what his word is for God's people. And so, I would just really encourage everybody to move past this place of fear. And if all they can do is move past this place of fear and lean in from a place of curiosity, even if you're still skeptical, even if you can just lean in from this place of curiosity, my guess is that curiosity is going to be a better fuel for your learning than fear. Because if we're fearful, we're not going to touch it. We're not going to look at it. We're not going to explore it. We're not going to wonder. But if we can enter into this space of curiosity, that becomes the fuel to our learning, because what's going to be required in this next season is for us to learn, relearn. Like we're just going to have to be continual learners,
right?
And not worried about failure in these tools. And it's going to allow us to be able to see that. And here's the harsh reality. Our people sitting in our pews are going to be required to use generative AI in their day-to-day jobs.
Yeah, for sure.
That most of them already are in some way. So if we as the church aren't looking at that and saying, hey, how can we, from an ethical, God-fearing, optimistic viewpoint, deploy those same types of things, man, I just think we would be missing an opportunity to minister to our people.
Right. Before we run out of time, Mike, myself, some others from our E2 team here in the office, we attended a leadership conference last week, and we heard AI over and again from the main stage. And there was a slide that came up. Mike, why don't you talk about that slide? And I know that Christina's going to,
we can even show it
podcast here.
Yeah, so it was just a real simple, you talking about just how quickly and how AI has developed so fast. This was a slide that illustrated that, and it took the first 800 million users of the internet, and it compared that to the first 800 million users of only ChatGPT. And so there's lots of AI tools out there, but only those two being compared. And what took 134 months with the internet to develop 800 million users only took 17 months for just ChatGPT.
Right.
Yeah. Pretty amazing.
So this whole arena is just skyrocketing with people engaging in it. As elders, a verse that we often point to in the Old Testament, 1 Chronicles chapter 12, it says in verse 32 that the sons of Issachar were men who had minds to understand the times, and they knew what Israel should do, so they could read the culture and respond appropriately. If we're going to be an effective elder, a leader of the church, we must be culturally aware, culturally relevant.
100%.
So we're very grateful for many of your comments today. I believe that what you have done, you even used the phrase wet the whistle. And what we're going to point to now is a webinar that Mike is arranging with you. Mike, why don't you give us the details of that? Would you please?
Yeah, sure. And Zach, you set us up perfectly for that, especially with that curiosity piece. Like perhaps many of us are just curious and we want to learn more. So we've got a little bit more of an extended time set aside. There's going to be two options on Thursday, November 6th, where Zach is going to join us for an hour and a half. One of those times is at 2:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and the other is at 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you're going to have to register for this. I actually did I got on chat and I asked, how do we host a fantastic webinar? And it gave me a whole checklist of some wonderful things to do. And one of those is we're going to ask you to register. We'd like to know who is going to be a part of this.
That's great.
And we would love it if entire teams, perhaps the entire elder team, if you would carve out one of those times. You could even get together if you wanted to, or you could join from your own device. But after you register, we're going to send you a link that gets you in on a Zoom room. And so we've got to get all of that out there. Once again, it's November 6th, and two time options: 2:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 7:00 p.m.
And Zach's going to be sharing during that 90-minute window the icing on the cake. There's no way that he can take a master's class that he does for hours in person with people, but he's taking the finest, the most relevant, the most helpful pieces of information from that master's class. He's condensing it into a 90-minute presentation. And when Mike makes mention about the registration, what we want you to understand is it's free. We're not going to charge you a registration fee. Jesus said in Acts chapter 20, it is more blessed to give than to receive. So we want to share this as an added benefit to your ministry. So please, as you see the link on this podcast, make sure that you register for this conversation with Zach that's coming up in just a few weeks. So, Zach, anything that you want to add before we call our podcast to a close?
No, I hope everybody will come be curious and hang out, because I love what you said about the sons of Issachar, and it always reminds me of the Hebrew brothers Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who were also students of the culture.
Yeah,
were trained up in the culture, and then when they had, when the pressure was on, they had the courage and wisdom to stand. And I really believe that's because they understood the full circle of the culture. So it's a great word, man. Great word. Excited to be with you guys. And man, just hope everybody brings their whole teams. It'll be good to hang out.
You bet. All right. Well, we're looking forward to it, and we're going to be praying for the Lord Jesus to really pour out his favor upon that time of equipping. All right, Zach, thank you so very much for your time today.
Thanks,
and
Zach.
Mike, thank you for getting all of this into motion. We're so grateful. Thanks, everybody.